Hi everyone. I don't know how many people will be able to join me tonight, but this is a new. I've never done a controlled assessment support live stream before, so give it a go. If you are able to join, then please do feel free to add your comments, your questions, so I can actually help you specifically with what it is that you're struggling with. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through some top things to think about and consider when dealing with your Unit 1 and then your Unit 3 controlled assessment, because obviously it is a massive part of your course. It is worth half of your first year, half of your second year, and then obviously collectively it's a quarter apiece. So all your marks count, and it's 8 hours. So you want to get it right the first time, and you don't want to have to do it more than once. Oh, fair enough, Harry. I am always appreciative of the recommendations from your teachers. Well, if you do have any questions, Harry, just send them over. And I'm sure I'll be able to answer anything that you've got, or most questions. Now, we are controlled quite a lot by the exam board when it comes to the controlled assessments. There's only so many things that the teachers can give you advice on, but I certainly will do my best to answer people's questions. I will be going over Unit 3. Yes, correct. So I will be going over Unit 3, but obviously it's easier if I go by what questions people have. But until questions start coming through, I will talk initially through Unit 1 first, and then I'll talk through Unit 3. So with the Unit 1 controlled assessment, the main things that you need to remember is to watch your timings. So timing is very, very important, as in do not spend too long on 4 markers. Don't spend too long on your ones. They are not as significant as 2.1 and 2.2, and then your campaign. Your campaign is worth 45 marks. So your campaign is really tricky. What the best way to deal with your campaign is in both exams, in Unit 1 and Unit 3, you will get what is called a brief. A brief is the short story that you'll read through. It's the same one over all the days of your controlled assessment, however it's structured by your college and by your teachers. So you'll get the same brief on every single day. And in that brief for Unit 1, there will be some crimes mentioned. And these crimes will be from 1.1. So they will cover white collar, technological, your individual, which is your honour, domestic, and your hate crimes. You've got your moral crimes, your state crimes. And I know I've missed technological, don't know if I mentioned technological, but it will only be crimes from those areas, but we don't know how many crimes there'll be or which crimes they are. And so for your campaign, you have to pick one of the crimes mentioned in the brief. If you don't, you lose a lot of marks. So you need to make sure that whatever crime campaign you do, not only is it a campaign for change, you have to be very clear. What is it that you want to change? Do you want to change awareness? Do you want to change law, policy? Do you want to change people's education on something? So what do you want to change? But it has to be a crime mentioned from the brief. So that is, again, whatever crimes are mentioned, you pick just one, and that is what your threes are going to be for. When it comes to 3.1, do not neglect finances and timescales. These are very, very important. The examiners really emphasize that thought and consideration needs to go into having logical finances, so finances that make sense, but also that you have a logical time scale, that things flow, that things follow through, that the decisions you're making are making sense. So the campaign is really tricky because you have to imagine that you're actually doing the campaign, that you're actually going to do it. You don't, of course, you don't do it, but you have to imagine like you are. Otherwise, it's very hard to get yourself in that mind frame of finances, what I do when, how you're setting up your social medias, whether you're going to, what merchandise you're going to create, etc. You have to make sure that you create 3 for 3.2. You have to make sure you create 3. So my students create a Facebook or a fake book. They create a hoodie or a t-shirt, and they create a poster. Those are what we recommend. But obviously students can make a mug, you can make a leaflet, but obviously what we don't know is what it will actually be on as far as the crime. So those are the ones that are very important. Also, don't forget in 2.1, those are your compare you compare your campaigns one, you need to make sure you compare, which means you have to use the right language. You have to do a similarity, a difference, both have, neither have, etc. But you also have to make sure you compare it to your own designed campaign. Otherwise, you again lose a lot of marks. So sometimes it's easier to do 2.1 at the end of your 8 hours so that you've already made your campaign and then you can write about it like it's a real campaign with the other campaigns that you've done. Please do, as I've said, I can jump straight into any specific questions that you've got. So if you do have any specific questions at any point, do just drop them in and I'll break off and I'll answer the questions that you've got. Otherwise, I'll go into Unit 3 and then I can always jump backwards and forwards. Hi there. Yes, that does make sense. Have you checked? Because that's a massive area. Obviously, 1.1 to go over all of those areas. I have done a specific video where I go through each of those sections. So for Unit 3, 1.1, the main things that you need to remember is to be evaluative. So you have to make sure you're actually evaluating. So you're not talking about just the cost of them. You're actually talking about how this impacts upon, I think it's criminal investigations is the wording. So how, if a police officer, for example, how much does a police officer get paid? Is that going to have a good impact or a bad impact if we keep losing police officers? So when we had that massive cut of 20,000 police officers, is that going to have a good or bad impact on a criminal investigation? So the video will go through each of those three areas for all of the people specifically, the personnel specifically, in a lot more detail. But if there's something specific about 1.1 that I can explain that isn't in the video, then please do ask. But that one is quite tricky. I do agree, but that's why you get more marks for it. That's why it's a good marker. But it's not my favorite, isn't that? The actual content of 1.1 is really good. It's the linking it to cost, availability, and expertise seems to make it quite mechanical. So don't worry if you're just kind of going through police cost, police availability, police expertise. That's fine. That is absolutely fine. That's recommended. Don't try and make it interesting or anything like that, because just tick the boxes they've asked whilst evaluating throughout. But obviously that one is a big marker, so it's good to get that one confident. So if there's something I can help as far as getting your confidence with that, please do ask. So as far as Unit 3, I think Unit 3 is easier. You guys have been there, done that. You have done the campaign in the first year. This is not your first rodeo. You know what you're doing in this 8-hour exam. You get a brief. It might be a little bit longer and a bit more detailed because obviously there's more things you have to talk about in this one than the first brief that you got in the first year. But with this one, you have to mention the brief in 3.1 and 3.2. You have to mention the brief. And I don't mean briefly, I mean you need to really look at it, not excessively, but you do need to make sure you've got a good few lines throughout both of those. So that's one of the big things to make sure you don't lose marks on. Also, watch your timings again. Don't spend ages on your 1.3s and your 1.4s, your 4 markers, your 6 markers. No, your big markers are 1.1, 1.2, 2.4, 3.1, and 3.2. Make sure you use the words in the questions that you're asked. So make sure you use the words. So, for example, we know 3.2 is focused on drawing conclusions. So actually use the word conclusion. Draw a conclusion. Don't just be implicit. If you draw a conclusion means that you need to draw judgments now. You've done criminology for a year and a half. Draw judgments on what is happening. Why is this case unjust or just, etc. Great question, Emma. Thank you for that one. Yes, definitely. You said you must use cost, availability, and expertise. You have to use that language to just stick with that. So whoever you're talking about, whether it's the police or the forensics or whoever it is, you just need to talk about those things. But in an evaluative sense, it's not a descriptive sense of police get paid this much, detectives get paid this much, it costs us this much to pay for them. That's not what it's wanting. The wording of the actual section is something can't remember the one off the top of my head. I don't think it's effective. I think it might be usefulness. How useful is it for criminal investigations? That might be 1.2. But the wording is evaluative based. Bigger questions most often are in some way discuss or evaluate. Otherwise, you wouldn't get those marks for those sections if it was just to describe. How do you link the brief in 3.1 and 3.2? That's an excellent question. Thank you for that question. So when you read the brief is designed to give you kind of, I don't want to say red flags because they're not red flags, you want them, but it will be very obvious in different parts, the bits that you can mention. So it will be to do with some sort of crime, something will have happened, something will have gone on, there will be some sort of case with information, and that information will be designed to link in some way to the sections that you have done. So when it comes to 3.1 and you're talking about validity of evidence, witnesses, media, whatever it is, there will be, you probably won't have all of those sections in the brief. You won't have law reports and judgments and everything else, but there will be some of them in the brief. And that's when you will then pick out and go talk about whether what's mentioned in the brief is valid or not valid. So that's something you have to do a bit more off the top of your head, which is trickier, but it should be fairly obvious that when you're looking at something, it might be obvious for media, for example, and you'll go, but that isn't accurate, and that might link to an opinion, and I could link that to bias, etc. And you are welcome to talk about the brief as if it's a real person or if it's a real thing. So you can either use the language of in the brief, that is fine, or whatever the person is called or people are called, group is called, whatever it might be, you can call them by their names. Then as far as 3.2, this is your unjust verdicts, unsafe verdicts, miscarriages of justice. Again, at least one of them should be in it. Otherwise, they're making it impossible for you to link it. So they're not going to do that. They're going to make your lives, they're going to make it doable. So there will be at least a link to an unsafe verdict, an unjust verdict. So don't forget, unjust means that an innocent person goes to prison or a guilty person gets off. That's what unjust means. Unsafe is when the evidence isn't used in the correct way. So there's something wrong with the evidence. So there'll be something in your brief that goes over that, and it will stand out to you, and then you can just talk about it like you would any other case, whether it's Jeremy Bamber, Amanda Knox, whoever you've done. So the brief will give you. So my advice is on that first day, when you get your brief the first time, maybe take a pen or a highlighter, whatever you're allowed in, and write all over it, highlight it, try and pick out these key words, try and pick out where your personnel are, try and pick out where the evidence is, try and pick out any issues, anomalies, anything like that that you might be able to discuss in your controlled assessment. Now, you have to mention it in 3.1 and 3.2. I recommend you mention the brief in passing if you can in other places, especially your big markers. 1.1, 1.2, 2.4. Just because you get more marks, I think there's 10, 15 and another 10 marker in there. So it gives you more detail, it gives you more things to talk about. But if you don't, doesn't matter, you don't lose marks. If you don't in 3.1, 3.2, you will lose marks. What is the most common mistakes? That's another great question. Really appreciate it. For Unit 3, Unit 3 makes less mistakes than Unit 1. Unit 1 makes a lot more mistakes. Unit 3, what will be the most common other than timings, running out of time, missing off grid sheets, timing, not linked speed, or not being specific with your case studies. So, for example, if you're talking about police, for example, and you're doing Stephen Lawrence, waffling on about something else, and I'm thinking, but we're talking about police here. How does this link? You have to make sure your case studies are specific to what you're talking about. We don't need the whole backstory. It's not a crime show. We're not doing a Channel 4 documentary. You only need to specify the bits that are relevant to what you want to argue. And then also do give specifics. You've studied these. I mean, it's the for me, it's one of the best parts of Unit 3. I love the case studies. The case studies are brilliant. So give specifics, give specific dates and names. Show that you've actually watched and studied these documentaries, these case studies. Don't just give sweeping statements that anybody on Wikipedia in 3 minutes can find out. So that's another place where you gain marks, is by being specific. Keeping to the clear areas as well. This one is very much about jumping through hoops. So as we said with 1.1, cost, availability, expertise, use those language. Talk about whichever people they ask in the questions in your exam, or however many they ask, etc. So read the questions on your brief carefully and stick to them carefully. So make sure you do follow however many they ask you to talk about, because they might ask you to talk about 5 of this or all of this, etc. So make sure that you get all the kind of the areas covered that you'll have been learning in class. Any other things? Those would be the main ones. Those would be the main ones. Students on the whole perform quite well in Unit 3, and the places that students lose the marks is the timings, not being specific with their case studies, and not linking to the brief enough in 3.1 and 3.2. Emma, yes, if you want to. It might be a little bit of a waste of time. Don't get too bogged down with the brief. But if you can't think of a case study to use that one instead. So you can. But for things like, 2.5, jurors and magistrates, just crack on with if it's a 4 marker, don't bother wasting your time mentioning the brief as well, when you're not. 4 marks is what you need to cover the main bits. It's not going to add anything extra to your answer. It's not going to add you any extra marks, so you're just wasting your time. So you can do, but I would only really recommend it in your bigger markers, because those answers need to be plump. You need plump answers for your big markers. But yeah, you're certainly not knocked down on it. You can mention it, even if it's just a sentence. You can add a sentence in, so you can even put this links to the brief because this happened to so and so, so and so. Yeah, that would be fine. Keep your questions coming, everyone. They're really helpful to help direct me into what I can support you with. What else can I mention for Unit 3? Obviously, a lot of the things will have been coordinated by your teachers. So some of you will be doing it over in class time, some of you will be doing it over 3 days, some of you are doing it 2 over 5. So I can't really help with the navigation of times or what to do when or anything like that, because it'll be very unique depending on your institutions. Hi, I've just explained how to link the brief to 3.1, 3.2. Thanks for joining us. So this live stream will be available afterwards, so just watch back. Oh, absolutely, Emma. Use the same case studies. That is not a problem at all. You can sometimes use the same case study in the same one as well. So, for example, 2.4, if you've got a case study that links to evidence and media, use the same one, because obviously what you're talking about will be different in that case study. So, absolutely use different case studies. Use the same case studies in different assessment criteria. That's not a problem. In fact, it's probably recommended, because that means you'll know that case study better and able to link it across. So that's a really good thing to do. Great question. I've never come across anything that says about whether the cases should be UK based or not. I study all sorts of cases with my students. A few of them do tend to be, quite a few of them do tend to be UK based. But if you want to talk about something that's happened abroad, like in America, absolutely fine. Because obviously, one of the big cases that we do is Amanda Knox. And whilst it was a British girl that it happened to, it happened in Italy. So, and so it was an Italian court case and everything like that. So, no, you don't have to stick to UK cases at all if you have one that you can work with that answers all the questions and the points, and you know it well enough to link to your assessment criteria. So no, it doesn't. As far as my understanding is, it doesn't have to be UK based. Yeah, Amanda Knox is a oh, don't even get me started on Amanda Knox. Amanda Knox case is frustrating. It is fascinating. It is a very, very good one that comes up that you can use in pretty much every single assessment criteria, give or take. So yeah, Amanda Knox is a very good one to know. If you don't know Amanda Knox, don't worry. It's not worth panicking yourself because you'll have done other ones, but it's a very, very good one. Yep, you just need to know the full code test. So you just need to know the evidential and the blah 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 blah. It's gone. Not the threshold. That's the other bit at the end. I can't even remember. It's a good job you get to take your notes in, isn't it? Public interest. Thank you very much. That was my clue to see if you were listening or not. Yeah, public interest. So I would just make sure you explain um, very, very quickly, maybe 2 or 3 lines, why we have the CPS, why the CPS were brought on board, what the CPS's aims are, obviously, to make sure that the evidence is reliable in order to go to the court. And the way that they do that is by putting it through the full code test. And so, therefore, if it passes these tests, and then I talk about what the 2 tests are and how evidence can go through it, therefore, they see it as reliable evidence enough to be able to go forward to court. So that's all you need for that one. Yeah. Um, can you also make sentence examples? So how do you structure answers for unit three? You would have to give me a specific because I won't be able to just stream them off the top of my head. So if you've got a specific assessment criteria, then I can give you some sentence starters. But usually, whatever the kind of the question area is, those would be a sentence starters. So whatever when it is examine the lay people or and I think it just says magistrates, doesn't it? For 2.5, so that would be just the structure that you'd follow. But if you want me to give a specific example, give me an assessment criteria to do it with, just because asking for all of Unit 3 is quite big. Um, Um, I agree. I think 1.1 because it's an evaluation, 2.4. I also think I think it's a very, very good thing to do. And I highly agree with your teacher. I think that you don't have to do big conclusions, but I think for all of your big ones, even 1.2 and your threes, 3.1, 3.2, I think doing short conclusions, short summaries of therefore, for example, for 3.1, therefore, is it valid? Therefore, what is your overall conclusion about unjust verdicts? For 1.1, is it, I think it's useful or effective, whichever one it isn't. It's 1.2 that has the other one. So I would definitely, I agree with your teacher. I would do conclusions. I would draw conclusions. And as I said, you only need maybe 1 or 2 lines. Don't do a lot, but I think that it really helps to emphasize the closure of that argument. Because then day when you're evaluating it or you're discussing something or drawing conclusions, there is that element of needing closure on it. So yes, I do. I highly agree with that. But you don't need conclusions for all the short ones. Don't waste your time. For 2.4, what are the positive and negative effects of eyewitnesses and expert witnesses? It's just your strengths and weaknesses. That's all positive and negative means. So all it means is that you need what is good and bad about eyewitnesses and what is good and bad. So, for example, a positive impact of an expert witness is that they might be able to shed some light on a case study, be able to shed some light on a specific piece of evidence. They might be able to help with miscarriages of justice, like a woman named Angela Shaw. She was the woman that got Barry George out of prison, who was arrested because of the Jill Dando case, and because she said that to have a single particle of gunshot residue in your coat in London actually is likable, is it's a likability when living in London. So she was an expert witness to do with use of guns and gunpowder, and the tiny particles. So therefore she had a positive impact on the case, which meant that the miscarriage of justice was overturned and he was released. A negative impact of expert witnesses would be things like, because they are so highly regarded, that pretty much whatever they say people believe. Looking at things like the pathologist and the paediatrician in the Sally Clark case, the paediatrician that made up the statistic, the pathologist that changed his account. So that had a negative impact in that it put an innocent woman in prison. So it's just what is good and bad about these things. That's all positive and negative impact means. But also, if you check out the video that I did for 2.4, I will have gone through each of these specifically in a lot more detail. So I don't want to ignore your question, but the PowerPoint will go over it in a lot more detail for you. Oh, did you get any feedback from your teacher? You might not have got any feedback because, again, it's very difficult when we're not allowed to give an awful lot of feedback. So, was your timings good? Did you put enough detail into your longer answers? Was there a certain level of structure? Maybe if you haven't checked out the videos that I've done on YouTube, check them out, because even if you don't watch all the PowerPoints are structured, so it might give your notes a bit more structure that you can then follow. Make sure you actually know your case studies as well. If you don't know your case studies, and your exam is soon, stick with knowing 2 or 3 really well. Stick with Jeremy Bamber, that will always be able to link to a lot. Amanda Knox and Stephen Lawrence, those 3 pretty much you can mention nearly every single one. So if you're not very confident with your case studies, just do a bit of research into some more and more detail. So still got a D. Well done on watching the videos. 1.1 and 1.2. What could you have maybe done wrong? Maybe not enough detail. I mean, how long were your answers? I would expect the answers to be of a reasonable length for that. Did you use your words? So for 1.1, did you use the words cost, availability, expertise? Did you evaluate? For your 1.2, did you again use the right words, and did you talk about it in an evaluative sense? Did you link the case studies specifically and detailed to what it was you were talking about, such as your evidence? Emma, yes, 1.2, you've done. It's such a silly hoop to jump through that you have to talk about situation and type. You just literally link it to the words they use. So, type is, what type is it? Violent, e-crime, or there's another one. There's 3 of them. And then situation, is it the street? Is it in the police station? So you literally need 2 or 3 sentences for both of them. That's it. So what you would say is that CCTV is used here, or evidence is used here, and so you wouldn't. Yeah, you don't need to go in a lot of detail, but you will get marks for saying the situation with the word that the examiners use, and type, seeing the word violent crime, e-crime, etc. So yes, it's one of those silly little hoops you have to jump through that really doesn't add much to your answer, but they want it, we do it. 6 out of 10 for 1.1. That's not that bad. Um, it's hard for me to. I wouldn't, other than the things I've already said, I wouldn't be able to give you any other advice on what happened. Detail, length of answer, link back to the question, specific case studies, linking to the specific area. Those would be the things that normally would knock students down. At property, yes. Thank you very much. I don't think you need to write a conclusion after mentioning cost. I wouldn't do a conclusion after each of the sections, cost, availability, expertise. I'd just do a conclusion after it once you're moving on to the next type of personnel or whatever it is you're talking about. I wouldn't do a conclusion for each. That sounds pretty good to me. There must be a reason. There will be a reason why. Did you maybe ask your teacher if she can give or he can give some whole class general advice, because they you can give a bit like what I'm doing now. I'm giving whole general feedback advice, saying check this. So then it might not be directed straight to you, but kind of collectively, just to give you an idea, because obviously it is important for you to know how to improve when you clearly want to improve. Um, but other than what I've said, I wouldn't know. So I'm sorry about that. Oh, that's great. I hope you found them useful. So yes, so you're on Unit 1. Yes, my students only study 4 campaigns for Unit 1, but then for 2.1, but you have to link it to your own campaign that you're designing in the threes. So you have to link to talk about 4 campaigns. That's how many my students do. You might have done different ones, so that's no problem at all. But you have to link it also and compare it to your own designed campaign. 2.2, you don't have to. My students use a range of different campaigns. You don't have to use the same ones in 2.1 and 2.2. You don't have to use the same campaign. So my students look at Help for Heroes, and we look at something about homelessness. So we don't even use the same ones that are in 2.1. No, unfortunately, we don't know the grading. Your teacher won't even know the grading. So your teacher will mark your controlled assessments using the mark schemes the exam board give us. And then our marks are then sent. So then the exam board asks for a certain amount of them. We send some papers away. We get them checked to see if our marking's on point. And then way down the line, once all the marks have been checked, we're happy with the teacher's marking, it then gets all put together and then they work out the grade boundaries. It's an extremely complicated and long process. So, no, there is no way of navigating grades. But just using the same grades that you would have with any A levels, kind of your 90% plus round there is going to be your A stars, your 80s, your A. Usually it's slightly high because controlled assessments, you get to take your notes in. So usually the grade boundaries are a bit higher than that, but that gives you a very rough idea. But again, they can go up and down, as I've said. Nothing worse than the Unit 2 exam. Um, It's not coming flooding back to me. I have to say, I can't. I can't remember the Unit 2 exam, but I know that year on year, a number of students, when I do the live streams in the summer for the Unit 2, Unit 4 exams, a number of students doing the Unit 4 are also resitting Unit 2. I always advise to resit Unit 2 anyway, for 2 reasons. One, you've got nothing to lose, because if you do even worse, then you keep your better mark, but also because knowing Unit 2 for Unit 4 really helps. So don't worry if you didn't do great in Unit 2, because that can change. No, don't draw conclusions for 1.3, 1.4. Waste of time. Only small markers. Nah, I wouldn't. That's just my opinion. Okay, that's a great question, JT. Thank you for that one. Normally, I get these questions in the Unit 4 live streams in the summer. I get a lot of questions about marking and grade boundaries. Basically, when you move into the second year, you no longer keep hold of the BB. They just become a mark. So that would be 71, 78, or whatever it might be. You no longer get the grades. They add the marks all together for all 4 of your units. And then all 4 of them marks get put into the big compilation across the country. Then they work out grade boundaries from those. So you no longer, so this is why you might get a B in the first year, but then all of a sudden it goes up or down because the B no longer exists. That's a B for the first year, but because you continue, that B is then banked, as in now all you move forward with is the core marks, which is why I say if you get a B in unit 2, but you only just scrape a B, brilliant, keep it. Don't resit it if you want a B, because actually you know the mark, it's the mark that you're taking forward, not the grade that you're taking forward. So that's how they work it out in the big picture. So that's how they do it. But yeah, it's a complicated process. It's the same with all A levels. Brilliant. Don't worry about doing any resits then. 1 mark from an A in unit 2. You smashed it. That is brilliant, because all that means is you need a couple of marks into an A in one of these exams and you're into the A category, as long as the marks, the grade boundaries don't go massively up or down in your case. We don't want them to go down. But no, that's a brilliant, is that. The highest you can get in first year is an A. It's not the highest you can get in the second year. You can leave with an A star in criminology, but it's the highest you can get in the first year. You can't get an A star until your second year. As far as I know, we certainly don't do it at our institution. If you resit the campaign, you resit the whole lot. You can't just resit sections of it. If you didn't do well in a campaign, then and you want to resit, you resit unit 1. You can't pick and choose the bits that you want to resit. It's not like a redraft or a redo. No, if you it's not health and social care and things is different in that sense, in that you can redraft and resubmit things. For criminology, it's still a proper exam in that sense, that if it doesn't work on the day, you can't resubmit sections. You've got to just do the whole lot again. Oh, that's very, very kind of you both. Thank you very much. I'm pleased I can help. Blind leading the blind sometimes, but I certainly do my best. If there's any other questions that I can help people with, anything else I can navigate, anything else I can go over, um, I think it's just making sure you know your notes, making sure you know what's going to happen. Don't go in that exam with long nails either. No, no long nails. Get ready to type and type with speed. So yeah, making sure you know your notes and your notes are clear. That's the key thing. Make sure you haven't plagiarized. So make sure you've put everything into your own words, whether it's from my PowerPoints, your teacher's class notes, your workbooks, the textbooks. It has to be in your own words. That's the biggest thing that the examiners are really very, very specific on, and understandably so, is making sure that what you write is in your own words. You cannot plagiarize. Is there anything else that people would, of course, at any point, if you've got any questions as well, just put them under the videos, and I always try and respond. So I always try and answer people's questions and things. But I just wanted to do this one tonight because some people do request to have a live stream for controlled assessments, even though it's much easier to help support students in Unit 2 and Unit 4 rather than this one. So if you do have any questions, though, that I can help with, always feel free to post them on YouTube, and I will try and respond. Other than that, I think I'll round it up if there isn't any other questions that people have. Is there anything else that I can help anybody with? I will leave this available as well. So if you want to go back through any of the beginning bits, if you missed anything or anything like that, I will leave it on public, so you will be able to access it. No problem, Emma. Thank you for joining me. Right, folks. Well, thank you very much for giving up some of your Thursday evening to come and join me. I hope you've picked up at least one or two little bits, and good luck in your upcoming controlled assessments, whenever they are, whether they're in December like my students, or they might be in January or sometime later next year. I hope it goes really well, because whilst you take your notes in, there's still a lot to do, a lot to remember, a lot to be confident with. And I hope you get the marks that you want and that obviously you've put the work in for. So keep in touch. Let me know how it goes. If there is anything else I can do to help, just let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Bye for now.